A door that shouldn't have been shattered. The audio comes first. Thunderous crashes, wood giving way, metal splintering, the kind of impact that makes your stomach drop before you even know what you're seeing. Then, shouting. Overlapping voices, urgent, practiced, loud enough to fill every corner of a home.
Police, search warrant. Police, search warrant. And then the picture clicks on. An officer's body camera, shaking as people rush forward. It's chaotic, fast, tactical gear, flashlights, long guns pointed into a private space that was never supposed to look like a battlefield. The camera finally finds her. Anjanette Young, 50 years old, a clinical social worker, standing in terror, uncovered and stunned. Her face is a mix of shock and disbelief. Her voice cuts through the noise like a lifeline.
You've got the wrong house. What is going on? You've got the wrong house.
Not once, not as a suggestion. She says it again and again, over and over, until the footage becomes more than a record of a mistake. It becomes a record of how badly that mistake unfolded.
This is the story of a botched police raid in Chicago on the evening of February 21st, 2019, captured on body camera video so disturbing it sparked outrage around the country. It's also the story of how, when the system failed to protect her, she fought back and forced accountability. And at the center of it all is a simple, heartbreaking truth. Anjanette Young repeatedly told the officers they were in the wrong place, while a dozen armed men remained convinced they were somewhere else.
Home. The expectation most people never have to think about.
Most people don't imagine their home being invaded. You lock the door, you switch off the lights, you settle into the life you built. Privacy, quiet, safety. The idea is straightforward. Outside the walls is danger. Inside the walls is shelter.
That's why it hits so hard when something different happens. Because what happens in a wrong house raid isn't just about embarrassment or inconvenience. It's about terror, about humiliation, about the moment your body realizes it's trapped with strangers who have authority and weapons. And in Anjanette Young's case, the raid wasn't triggered by something she did. It was triggered by something someone claimed, a tip. Before the battering ram ever touched her door, there was a confidential informant. Someone who told a Chicago police officer that a known felon was illegally in possession of a handgun. The tip included an address, Anjanette Young's apartment. So an officer took that information and secured a knock and announce search warrant. That phrase matters because it describes a basic legal expectation. Police are supposed to announce themselves and give occupants a reasonable chance to respond before forcing entry. It's meant to prevent exactly the kind of chaos that turns a search into something more violent, more traumatic, more dangerous than it needs to be. But the tip had a fatal flaw. The suspect didn't live there. He lived in a neighboring building. Even worse, he was already wearing a GPS ankle monitor as a condition of his bond, meaning his location should have been verifiable. A straightforward check of available information could have shown police they weren't chasing the person they thought they were chasing. That check didn't happen, and that's one of the most damning parts of the story. The raid wasn't only wrong, it was wrong in a way that could have been caught before anyone got hurt. Before any door was smashed. Before any life was thrown into panic. February 21st, 2019. The raid hits like a shockwave. 12 officers arrived at Anjanette Young's apartment. They were led by Sergeant Alex Walensky. Think about what that means. Not one mistake, not two. An organized response by a group large enough to move, surround, and control a room. Anjanette was a social worker, not a criminal. She had no record. She was in her apartment winding down after a long day, and at some point, while she was getting undressed in her bedroom, the world exploded. The officers didn't pause. They didn't give her time in the way knock and announce implies. The time window they offered was so short that later critics argued it was essentially insufficient. Seconds, not the kind of reasonable pause that can prevent people from being caught mid-situation without warning.
The battering ram shattered the front door. Then the officers rushed in.
And the body camera footage, already difficult to watch, becomes even harder because of the clarity of her fear. Her hands are taken and shoved behind her back. Metal handcuffs clamp on. Her body is forced into compliance before her mind can even catch up with what she's experiencing.
Surrounded, exposed, powerless, in her private home, in a moment where she's not being arrested for anything she did. She's being treated like she belongs to someone else's story.
Anjanette Young repeatedly told them the truth.
She told them her name. She told them she lived alone. She told them she was a social worker. And, most importantly, she told them they were in the wrong place. Her voice, shaking, urgent, kept returning to one line, like a compass trying to find north.
You've got the wrong house. What's so disturbing in the video is how her repeated statements don't produce immediate clarity from the officers. Instead, shouts and confusion fill the room. The officers fanned out to search, leaving her standing in her living space, handcuffed and exposed, while armed men with flashlights move through her home as if they're in the right place. There's a horrifying detail in the footage. For roughly 31 seconds, she is left partially uncovered, an interval that becomes symbolic of how the system can treat a person's vulnerability like a side note. Eventually, an officer grabs a jacket, then it slips. Later, a blanket is found, but her situation doesn't stabilize right away. She remains handcuffed underneath. She pleaded through it, and the record shows she was handcuffed for nearly 17 minutes. Overall, the raid lasts about 30 minutes, half an hour of a life being dismantled in front of strangers. So, when did they realize? Later, way later. In a properly cautious operation, the discovery of a mismatch should be immediate. Instead, the realization comes gradually. One officer eventually shows her the warrant about 20 minutes after the break-in. The warrant includes her address, which confirms they're at the location they believe is correct. But the name of the target is a man she has never heard of. That's when the room seems to tilt. The reality of the situation settles in. They were in the wrong place, unquestionably. Not a misunderstanding she caused. Not a detail she got wrong. Not a paperwork mix-up that could be corrected quietly. They marched into the wrong home and treated the resident like the threat. After the raid, shattered door, no suspect, no evidence. When the officers finally leave, they leave behind destruction, a broken door, a ransacked apartment, and a woman whose sense of safety is permanently altered. They do not find the suspect. No guns, no evidence of any crime. And they hand her a copy of the warrant, the document that launched the whole nightmare. Then they're gone. Just like that. A life turned upside down in half an hour, and no one stays behind to explain, to repair, to acknowledge the harm in a way that feels real. The second fight, trying to get the video and being blocked for years. If that were where the story ended, it would still be serious. But what happened next shows another layer of the problem. Accountability failed twice. In the weeks and months after the raid, Anjanette Young tried to get answers, especially the body camera footage. She knew the video would show the truth, her repeated warnings, the timing, the behavior, the decisions. So she filed a Freedom of Information Act FOIA request to obtain the footage. The city of Chicago denied it. And they weren't just denying her request. A similar request from journalists at CBS Chicago, who were already investigating a pattern of wrong rates, was denied too. The transparency tool that's supposed to protect the public was being used as a wall, so she had to escalate to a lawsuit. Only then did a judge compel the Chicago Police Department to turn over the body camera footage to her legal team. And in December 2020, the story was about to become public. CBS Chicago planned to broadcast its report with the video. Just hours before airing, the city did something critics called extraordinary and alarming. The city's law department filed an emergency motion in federal court to block the television station from airing the footage.
The attempt to stop the video and the judge who said no. The city's lawyers argued that airing the video would violate a court confidentiality order. But a federal judge rejected the motion quickly and firmly. That night, the footage aired, and the impact was immediate. People saw the raid for themselves, how her home was violated, how she was treated, and how the system tried to control the narrative when the truth was staring back at the public through body camera footage. The outrage wasn't just online chatter. It was real, public pressure from people who recognized something deeply wrong, not only the raid itself, but the attempts to limit what the public could see. An outside investigation later confirmed that the mayor's office, the police department, and the law department made false or misleading statements about the case. When the system fights to hide its own mistakes, the mistake stops being an error and starts becoming a pattern of behavior.
Public outrage, and then the slow, heavy work of investigation. After the broadcast, public outrage rose fast. Clergy, lawmakers, civil rights activists, many people who might not follow local police procedures, condemned the raid as a profound violation of human dignity. And once the attention landed, institutions couldn't ignore it. The mayor's office, which had tried to block the video, got pulled into a political firestorm. The city's top lawyer resigned.
Then the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, COPA, began a massive investigation. This wasn't quick. It ran for 16 months. COPA conducted more than 30 interviews and reviewed hours of video. And the findings were staggering. COPA's report identified around 100 allegations of misconduct involving roughly a dozen officers. It described a cascade of failures, from the flawed warrant process to the dehumanizing treatment of Anjanette Young. They found significant deficiencies in Chicago Police Department policy and training regarding search warrants. In other words, this wasn't just one bad moment caused by one person. It pointed towards something structural, process failures, training gaps, and a culture that didn't stop to correct itself when something didn't add up. Discipline and accountability, charges, suspensions, and an eventual firing. Once COPA's findings were on the record, discipline followed. Slowly, because accountability almost always moves slower than harm. Based on those findings, Chicago's Superintendent, David Brown, moved to discipline officers. In November 2021, administrative charges were brought against Sergeant Alex Walensky, the supervisor on the scene. The recommended outcome was termination. The charges included violations related to the knock-and-announce rule, failing to intervene, and a catastrophic failure to carry out his duty. Several other officers received suspensions as well. Even then, the public had to wait. Accountability didn't land all at once, but financial consequences arrived sooner. In December 2021, the Chicago City Council unanimously approved a $2.9 million settlement for Anjanette Young. It doesn't undo anything. A settlement doesn't restore a shattered door or return the sense of safety taken from her. As Alderman Jeanette Taylor put it, $2.9 million may sound large, but it won't give Miss Young her dignity back. Still, the settlement was a clear sign of what the city could not fully deny. It owed something real for what happened. June 2023, the end of a sergeant's career. The final step came years later. In June 2023, more than 4 years after the raid, the Chicago Police Board voted to fire Sergeant Alex Walensky. The vote was 5-3. The board found him guilty on multiple charges and described his failure as incompatible with continued service. It specifically cited what happened after it became clear that Anjanette Young had been telling the truth. He allowed her to remain handcuffed and exposed, even as the reality of the wrong house was dawning. A Cook County judge later upheld the firing, making it permanent. Walensky's career, which had lasted decades, ended with a decision that centered on leadership and duty, not merely making a mistake, but failing to act properly when the situation called for correction.
Anjanette Young's fight becomes policy, the Anjanette Young Ordinance.
After all of this, the story could have become only a tragedy and a case file. But instead, Anjanette Young turned her experience into advocacy. She said the firing was only a small piece of the justice she had been waiting for.
That phrase matters. It suggests something bigger than personal vindication, something aimed at preventing future harm. Her push became the Anjanette Young Ordinance, a proposed set of stricter rules for how Chicago police execute search warrants.